My name is Julianne and I am an education specialist here at the Richardson Zoo, and welcome to more of our digital programs. So today we are going to be talking about biodiversity, the impact it has on people, and the impacts that people can have on the environment around us. So let's start with what biodiversity is. Biodiversity means many different animals or plant species in one place. Now we can look at biodiversity locally. Within the rainforest there's a huge amount of biodiversity, many different plants, many different animals. Or we can look at it throughout the whole world. Worldwide, there's a ton of different plants and animals that all work together to form cohesive environments and ecosystems. We can also look at it within individual species as well. So think about animals that can have different colored fur of the same species. That is diversity within that species. There's genetic diversity, which is really important within zoos and breeding programs. So diversity really just means differences that kind of work together to form that cohesiveness. So why is biodiversity so important? Why are we protecting different plants and animals? So what if a few of them disappear? There's still a bunch left, right? Well, not necessarily. Every plant, every animal has an important role, an important job to play in the environment where they are found. No matter how small, no matter how big, losing a species can have a big impact on the environment. Biodiversity allows us to have a lot of the ecosystem resources. Think about oxygen. Plants produce that oxygen for us. Without a bunch of different plants, we wouldn't have the oxygen that we need to survive. Plants also help clean our water. They can filter out pollution. They hold the dirt together to prevent erosion getting into our waterways. So if we lose plant species, our water would not be nearly as clean. We wouldn't be able to use it as well as we can right now. Think about our food. Every time you go to the grocery store, whether you're buying plants, meat, cereal, things like that, those all came from growing something or an animal, right? So without the biodiversity in nature, we really wouldn't be able to survive. Nature has a huge impact on our lives. That's why protecting biodiversity is so important, protecting that wide array of different plants and animals that we find throughout the world. Now, there are some animals that people don't tend to like, people think are kind of scary. Think about your snakes, your bugs, especially mosquitoes, right? Spiders. So these are different animals that maybe not everyone enjoys, but that doesn't mean they are inherently bad. These animals, again, play a really important job in their ecosystems, and we are going to meet one of those animals right now. So this right here is Rosie, and Rosie is a Chilean rose-haired tarantula, and I am actually going to pick her up and hold her. So the way we do this for them, you can tap their back legs and she will just walk onto my hand. That way it doesn't scare her. She's super used to this, and as you can see, she's walking right up there and I can pick her up. Now, I know a lot of you are probably kind of freaking out right now because spiders, but these guys are super, super important to the environment. Spiders are a really good pest control throughout the entire world. Not just tarantulas, but all the different species of spiders. They eat bugs. Obviously some smaller, some larger. But without spiders, we would not be able to have as much of our agriculture as we do right now, because they eat the bugs that eat our plants, right? So spiders actually really help us survive. Now again, this is a Chilean rose-haired tarantula. They get their name because they are from Chile in South America. And they are called rose-haired because of this beautiful pinkish rose color that's on their back. It's a little difficult to see in this light. Now, they do have hairs all over their body. For tarantulas, this is pretty common. And those hairs aren't exactly like the hairs we have. They're much shorter, but they're actually kind of like mini needles all over their body. And the reason they have these is actually to protect them from predators. So what a tarantula will do, if a bigger animal is coming up, getting too close, they will use their back legs to kick off some of these hairs on their back. And those little needle-like hairs will go into that animal's nose as they're sniffing around. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that would be very pleasant to get a bunch of little needles going up my nose as I'm trying to smell something. So that animal tries to get them out of their nose, they get distracted, they move away, and then the tarantula can get away to continue finding their food, which is bugs. So that's why they have those hairs. Now, as you can see, she's really not doing that behavior while she's on my hands. She's just walking. I'm just kind of like the ground floor, little spider treadmill. Now, tarantulas and spiders, they are not insects, they are arachnids. So, big difference is insects have 6 legs, spiders and other arachnids have 8. They only have 2 sections of their body instead of 3. So, a few differences, but they are a super important role in our environment. Now, I know many of us have probably seen spiders in our homes before, and that might not be your favorite place to see them. But there's a really awesome way that we can take care of that without hurting them, putting them back outside to continue doing their jobs. So I'm going to put her down, and then I'm going to show you exactly how we can get a spider to go back outside. Alrighty, so if you do see a spider inside your house and you want to move it outside, all you really need is a cup and a piece of paper. So to do this, what you want to do is, you see the spider, so it's right here. You put the cup over the spider, so it's right in the middle, and then you take a piece of paper and slide it right underneath like this, and then you can lift that whole thing up, take it outside, and then you set it down on the ground, and even if you don't want to get too close to the spider, you just tip over the cup and step back and let it scurry on its way. So it goes back outside, it's still able to do its job, eat all those bugs and insects and things outside, and it helps protect those animals. So that's a really good way to get some of those creepy crawlies out of your home if you don't want to actually touch them. Alrighty, my friends. So that was the Chilean rose-haired tarantula. And if you have any questions, you can comment below. We will do our best to get those answers to you. But for now, let's say goodbye to Miss Rosie. So those spiders play a really important role in our environment, not only keeping us safe from all those bugs, but also keeping our agriculture safe, making sure that we can get those plants to eat when we are at home. So who knew those spiders have such a big impact on our lives? Now, the next animal we are going to meet is also from South America, but instead of the warmer areas close to the ground, they are higher up in the mountains where it's nice and cold. So this here is Iggy, and Iggy is a chinchilla. Now chinchillas are found in the Andes Mountains at pretty high elevation. They like the cold, rocky mountainsides. That is where they survive the absolute best. Now they are a rodent, so related to mice and rats and things like that. We hear a lot, they look like rabbits, they look like squirrels, but they're a little different than all of these things. They are their own species. But again, they really like those high elevations, those mountains. And the way they get around on those rocky mountainsides, they don't climb like we would, grabbing and pulling ourselves up. Instead, they hop, they kind of bounce between all the rocks as they move up and down that mountainside. So their feet are very specialized. They have pads on the bottom of their feet that help them grip on really well so their feet aren't slipping off the rocks. And they can jump really, really high. If Iggy was on the ground and he jumped straight into the air, he could jump to about my shoulder, which is pretty incredible considering the size that he is. Now, their long tails also help them with this jumping behavior. So if you've ever been on a balance beam, you've probably walked with your arms out to your side while you walk so you can move them around and stay balanced. Well, that's exactly how chinchillas will use their tail. They can move their tail from side to side as they are jumping and landing, and that helps them stay balanced on those rocks so they don't just topple over. So they're excellent at surviving in those high elevations. Now you can imagine up in those mountains, there's not a ton of plant life, but these are herbivores. They only eat plants. And so there's these things called lichens. They're really small green plants that grow on the surface of rocks. So they will use their teeth to scrape off those plants from the rocks. And as a rodent, their teeth are ever growing, so it's perfect for them. I don't think that would be too pleasant for us to try to eat, but that's where they find most of their food, sometimes grassy areas lower on the mountains. But they are eating those plants up in the mountains. Now, before we were talking about with spiders how they affect our lives. Now I want to talk about how people can actually affect animals' lives in the wild. Now, wild chinchillas, the ones that are actually found on the mountains, are actually considered an endangered species. And a big reason for that is people. So let's think about it. How often do you ever drink soda out of a can? I do pretty often. And those cans are made out of a metal called aluminum. Now, aluminum is a metal that we cannot create ourselves. We have to dig it out of the ground. Now, one of the biggest places in the world where there's like the most aluminum is underground in the mountains where the chinchillas live. So people go up and they dig out the whole mountainside to get the aluminum out of the ground. And this is destroying the chinchillas' homes. They don't have the rocks to jump on. They don't have food up there. And because they're so high up on the mountains, there's very limited places that they can move to. They can't survive lower down in elevation just because it's too hot for them. They need that nice cold weather. So something that we can actually do that will have a positive impact on wild chinchillas is simply recycle our pop cans, which sounds really easy, right? If you just put it in the recycling bin or take it to a recycling center, that's all we need to do. But the awesome part about that is we can reuse that aluminum that's in those cans. So instead of having to go out and re-dig more of the aluminum out of the mountainside, we can just use what we already have out in the world. So just by recycling, you can actually protect chinchillas all the way down in South America, which is a super, super awesome and super easy way that we can protect our environment and keep that biodiversity up, right? Because even though, again, it's just one animal, but they have a really positive impact on our environment up in those mountains. Now for them, they also have excellent hearing. You can see his big ears on his head, and that is so they can hear if a predator is coming. So as you can see, they're relatively small, and some of those large birds, hawks, eagles, things like that, would love to have these guys as a snack up in those mountains. So they're going to be listening to see if they can hear any of those coming up. So excellent sense of hearing. They have pretty good eyesight to look around, and an okay sense of smell, but their hearing is really their kind of superpower of their senses. Now you can also see their whiskers. So those whiskers are kind of like a built-in ruler on their face. So if you imagine those mountainsides, there's a bunch of cracks in the rocks and kind of mini caves throughout. That's where they love to hide. And so they'll go in, but it's really dark, so they might not be able to see. But if they take a step forward and those whiskers get pushed back, it's telling them there's not enough space in front of them to keep moving forward, so they know to stay where they are so they don't get stuck in those caves. If their whiskers are not pushed back, they know, oh, I still have plenty of room to keep moving into this cave. So they are pretty amazing little animals. And again, just by recycling, you can help protect them in their own home, which is really awesome. Alrighty, friends, let's say goodbye to Iggy. So as you can see, keeping that biodiversity up throughout the entire world is really important for people, for our own survival. Whether it's the spiders keeping our agriculture safe by eating all those bugs, simply keeping mosquitoes away from us, right? Or by protecting the chinchillas that eat some of those plants and provide food for some of those large bird species on those mountains. Keeping that biodiversity is really, really important and helps everything in the world survive. Now, before we go, we do have another activity that you can all do. So for this one, you're going to be doing some research with us where you're going to look into some invasive species. These are animals that don't really belong in a certain area and can cause harm to the other animals and plant life around. So see if you can find an invasive species that's from your home, or look into the ones that are on this activity here and see what you can learn about invasive species. Well, thank you all so much for joining us at the Lee Richardson Zoo for another educational activity. I hope you have a wonderful day.